Today we continue our NHL offseason plan series, and we are now at the sixth best team from the regular season, the North Division champion Toronto Maple Leafs. What will we expect from them this offseason? It could be some big moves. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we're continuing on our offseason plan series. We're now at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, if you're following along this series, you would have noticed we had to skip over a few teams because they're still in the playoffs, so we're waiting for those teams to have their season end before we complete those videos. But for today, there's a lot to talk about with the Maple Leafs. They're going to be one of the more interesting and fascinating teams to watch and how they react to another first-round loss here in the playoffs. There could be some substantial changes, so we'll analyze that here in today's video. So what we're going to do first is analyze their regular season stats, their cap space, expiring contracts, and then look at the 5 burning questions facing this team as they head into the full swing of the offseason. So let's take a look first at their regular season statistics. Now, as I've mentioned, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs were the North Division champions, finishing with a record of 35-14-7 for 77 points. They really dominated the division for a big chunk of the year, had a plus 39 goal differential, which is really, really good. We saw the Leafs really play better defensive hockey this year and cut down on goals against while keeping up their goal scoring ability. So that team, compared to the last few years of the addition of the Maple Leafs, I do think it's fair to say was a better all-around team at both ends of the ice here. The power play actually had a really good start to the year and it was really solid early on, but then they really lost their way. The second half of the year, they were terrible. They finished 16th best in the NHL, but if you look at how it performed in the second half of the year and into the playoffs, they were one of the league's worst, which is absolutely ridiculous and disappointing considering the talent they can put on the ice. That's going to be a major focus for them this offseason to get that corrected. They finished with a 20%. That goes to show you how good they were early on to still manage that, considering how ineffective it was down the stretch of the regular season here. Penalty killing wasn't great, but it wasn't certainly horrendous either. 78.5, 23rd best in the league. They probably would have liked to get that a little bit better, and I do think it's fair to say, again, that will also be a focus here, but I think the power play is even more important, to be honest here. Now, from a salary cap perspective, they have $11.7 million in available salary cap space here, which is not really a whole lot. Of course, they have a lot of money tied up in some key guys, and we're going to have to analyze that here in the next segment because they do have a lot of expiring contracts, and we'll see what they do here. Of course, the Maple Leafs had a 3-1 series lead against the Montreal Canadiens and ended up falling victim to a comeback and lost the series in 7 games to Montreal in the first round, which I know many Leaf fans were completely shocked. At the same time, many weren't because they've seen this act before, unfortunately. But the Leafs are still yet to win a playoff series with this current group of players that have had 4 or 5 years now of consecutive playoff appearances ever since they come out of that rebuild. So this team needs to get some playoff results, or I do think there's going to be some jobs on the line and some potential big trades on the horizon here, which we'll discuss shortly. So next up, let's look at their expiring contract list of RFAs and UFAs. Now, the RFA list is pretty short and sweet. We only have one, and that's defenseman Travis Dermott. I think Dermott probably played well enough in the playoffs that he likely will be back with this team. I know many thought he could be the expansion pick for Seattle. At this point, though, I'm kind of thinking he might be protected, but we'll get into that a little later here as well. Obviously, they have some hard choices to make like many teams. On the UFA side, a big one, Zach Hyman. Will Hyman return? We'll discuss that in the next segment as well. Important piece for them. They have trade deadline acquisitions, Riley Nash and Nick Foligno, who both came over from Columbus. Highly doubtful either of those guys return. Nash didn't end up playing a whole lot, and Foligno didn't have a great run with the Leafs. It certainly was hurt at the end of it. I'm not sure the whole story there, but clearly Foligno's didn't have the success he or the Leafs were hoping for. Of course, they have some veteran guys too, like Thornton and Simmons. Certainly debatable if they return. I honestly don't know what direction we're going to go in here for the Maple Leafs. They did have Jason Spezza on that list as well, but he actually signed yesterday, in case you missed it. He signed another 1-year veteran minimum contract, $750, and he said he would gladly take less money if he was able to. Certainly a sentiment you'd like to see a few more players on this team, take to heart here, because there's, like I said, a lot of money tied up, and it's going to be challenging, to be honest. I have no doubts, but I think that they can find a way here to get this together. But Alex Galchenyuk's another guy, had some success. I know Leaf fans seem to be quite happy with him. Had his moments, though. He was a big reason why they lost that series in Montreal, to be honest. That giveaway in overtime that sent Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield down to give Montreal life, that was a turning point in the series, in my opinion. So as much as you saw some good, you also saw some bad, but I think based on comments from Kyle Dubas, I think the good might outweigh the bad in their opinion, and it wouldn't be shocking if he signs a 1-year cheap contract. He also got some defensemen like Zach Bogosian and Ben Hutton. Bogosian wouldn't be shocking if he signs another short-term deal with the Leafs. Hutton likely doesn't return. He was just a deadline insurance piece. Freddie Anderson, of course, another big piece, longtime starting goaltender who has lost his starting job, but still could be an effective goalie in the NHL, and I don't know where his future is going to lead him to, but it's likely not in Toronto, as well as David Riddick, who was picked up from Calgary as an insurance piece as well, ahead of the NHL trade deadline. So now we're going to jump into the 5 burning questions, and like I said, this is one of those teams. It was not difficult to come up with the questions or what direction we need to see, because there's a lot of answers this team is looking for this offseason. Burning question number 1 is, who is your goaltending tandem next year? Obviously, Jack Campbell's under contract. He played well. I have no doubt they have a lot of confidence in Campbell, but who's his partner going to be? That's a big question facing this team going into the offseason. Freddie Anderson's a free agent after completing a 5-year times $5 million contract. So obviously, I don't think Freddie returns. I mean, to me, he likely has aspirations to continue to be a starting goaltender, and I'm sure he'll at least explore the market and try to find himself a contract to pay him appropriately for that kind of role. Now, if he were to return to Toronto, it would have to be for cheap, and I'm just not sure that he's going to want to do that, or that the Leafs are going to want to do that either. Given their very limited salary cap availability, I just don't know they can even afford to pay him even $2 or $3 million, which is already a substantial pay deduction for him. So I just don't really see how Anderson comes back. So to me, they likely find another veteran goaltender to come in and be that backup or more of a 1A, 1B. I mean, maybe they could be fortunate enough to get a guy like Chris Driedger, who they could probably sign for a decent price tag. That's just one option. Maybe they make a trade with Columbus for a guy like Korpisalo. He's not making a ton of money, and it could be a great 1A, 1B with Campbell. Dallas is going to have Anton Khudobin at the mercy of expansion. He's not making a ton of money. Maybe he comes in. Like, those are just some options. I'm not really sure what they do, but to me, they bring in a guy like that to work with Campbell. And to me, as much as Campbell had a great run as a starter, I would still to get a goalie who's able to play more than just your traditional backup and would set up more of a 1A, 1B scenario just as insurance. If Campbell takes the job clearly at a training camp and runs with it, that's great. But he has not proven that he can play a large number of games for a full 82-game season. You got to remember, this was an abbreviated season, and of course, he didn't get to play as much as he would in a regular campaign. So I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that when he did do it, it was a different kind of season, different kind of schedule, and I would want some insurance there just in case. I mean, I'd have tons of confidence, and I'd let him run with it if he's able to. You just need to have a backup plan, because what if, right? If you can't get the goaltending, it doesn't matter the team in front of you. Things are not going to go well. That's a given. So it's an important situation, an important position for them. And to me, that's how they handle that. Burning question number 2 is, do you keep the big 4 together and run with this group one more time? Or do you consider making a trade? Now, to me, if they do go down the route of a trade, which I am not convinced they're going to do, it's likely going to be Mitch Marner. And here's why. For starters, John Tavares, no move clause. He's not going anywhere without his consent. I don't see him giving consent. There's no way they trade Austin Matthews. You don't even have to talk about that. Secondly, to me, Marner's making substantially more money than William Nylander. You can make an argument that Nylander was probably one of their top 1 or 2 forwards, especially in the playoffs. Why would you do that? That wouldn't make sense. Marner's the guy who struggled and is making more money, but yet has had terrific regular seasons, so there would still be lots of interest there. I'm not sure or convinced anywhere near it at all that they're going to do it, but if they do, he's the guy that goes. Now, it may not be this year. Maybe it's a year or 2 down the road. I'm not sure. But to me, you only do it if you can save some money and create another, different kind of group here of those big 4 guys to make it a different kind of dynamic. The one thing that Brendan Shanahan talked about was that killer instinct. Well, obviously a shakeup could generate some players that might be able to do that. So to me, I think they give this top 4 guys making all the money another shot. I think we're going to see moves around them. But I don't know if you can go more than another season here without success before you consider that. But the other part of this too that would make me think about it, at least if I'm Kyle Dubas, is that in the first game of the series against the Montreal Canadiens, you saw John Tavares go down in that unfortunate collision with Corey Perry and was out for the series and the season. Now that kind of exposed their center depth a little bit. If one of their other big four here was a centerman, well, clearly he could be there to take that role, and maybe a guy like Tavares could move to the wing here. I mean, it wouldn't be a terrible thing to have Tavares be a winger at this stage of his career if you had another guy making a comparable contract or even hopefully a little less that could play center. Like we explored a Jack Eichel for Mitch Marner trade a couple days ago, actually, on the channel. Not saying it's going to happen, but it was being discussed in a Sportsnet article, and I just made the points that to some degree you can make an argument that it does kind of makes some sense here. So especially, from the center position, if a guy like Alex Kerfoot goes in expansion or they have to trade him because they're going to lose him in expansion, that number 3 guy's gone, doesn't have the insulation anymore. Sure, you've got Matthews and Tavares, but what do you have after that? One of them go down injured, then suddenly the other teams can match up against one of your top lines, and you don't have that two-headed monster anymore, and you kind of are in a little bit more of trouble. So to me, I'm not sure they do it now, but at some point, if they don't have another year of playoff success, I think it doesn't get explored by next year at the latest. Burning question number 3 is, can you bring back Zach Hyman? Because Hyman has proven to be extremely valuable to this team. He's grown as an offensive player, a hard worker, strong defensively. He does a little bit of everything for this team. He can kill penalties. He can put them on the power play. He plays a lot with the top guys, digs the puck out in the corner, creates time and space for them to do their magic, and he's just so important. But at the same time, this is his one opportunity and probably his only opportunity, given the fact he's a little bit older, a little further into his 20s than some of the younger players, that this is only his real shot, probably really hitting a home run and cashing in on some serious money. So does he take a hometown discount to stay in Toronto? Maybe. I have said all along that if anybody on this roster were to do that, outside of the veteran guys taking the short-term deals, it's Zach Hyman. I think it's more important to Zach Hyman than just about anybody else on this team to play in Toronto and to win and be part of that team that finally brings a championship to Leafs Nation. To me, that's where he's at. But at the same time, he's probably going to be conflicted here. You're looking at a guy who can probably command $5.5 to $6 million on the open market, and it's believed the Leafs probably can't pay more than about 4.5 based on their cap situation. Maybe they can get closer to 5, but then they're going to have to shed money again elsewhere. It's going to be tough. It really boils down to what else they do on this roster, and they do have some solutions, in my opinion, they can look to create some money to bring in a guy like Hyman back, and we'll get into that next. But to me, you do everything you can to keep him. It's just that simple. Burning question number 4 is, can you create some salary cap space to keep Hyman, shake up your roster, and give more flexibility by maybe trading Morgan Rielly? To me, out of all the veteran players that have been with this team for an extended time, Rielly's the most likely guy to get moved, and to me makes the most sense. He's only a year away from free agency, so you're bound to be at risk of losing him because of cap space at that point anyway. And secondly, you have a guy like Rasmus Sandin, in my opinion, can pretty much do the job of Rielly now anyway at a much, much cheaper price. You can save money and get similar value and production from Sandin. We saw later into the season when he was able to play more and into the playoffs, Sandin was quite often getting the starts on power play 1, which was Rielly's biggest job for the longest time. So why not take that plunge? To me, it makes a lot of sense. You can save money, because if Rielly stays with the Leafs, he's going to command a big salary increase in his next deal, and clearly you cannot afford to pay that. And not if you're keeping the other big 4. Unless you're trading Marner or somebody, Rielly's likely not coming back anyway. So make the move now, get some other pieces back that maybe you can get a couple of smaller contracts to fill out some other roster spots to make the team a little bit better, and let Sandin run with it. To me, that's what I would do. It saves you money, and hopefully gives you a shot at keeping Hyman, because you can use some of those savings to put towards him and keeping him in the fold. And the last burning question for me here today is, how do the Leafs find that killer instinct that Brendan Shanahan, especially more than anybody, talked about in the end of season press conference, that they need to take that next step to have the playoff success? Well, clearly it looks as though that some of these veteran guys who you think could bring it didn't bring it, and I'm not sure we see them return. Like, to me, Joe Thornton and Wayne Simmonds were a major disappointment, and I'm not even sure that it's a case of lack of effort. It's just lack of ability at this stage in their career. They don't have that same aggressive, physical style of play that we would have seen out of them before. They just don't have it in them anymore, is my take on it. I mean, you saw Wayne Simmonds at times earlier in the year drop the gloves, play that role more, but as playoffs came and things kind of get ramped up, he kind of disappeared, in my opinion. So to me, you need players like that, but obviously they were not the right guys. You're going to need some more players to come in on cheaper contracts, short-term deals, $1 million or less. There's no doubt you need to do the same kind of strategy again, but you need a different style of player, and those guys, just to me, are not the guys. Spezza was one of the best players on this team last year. If you look at a points per game standpoint, at 5-on-5, he was the third best in the NHL. Talk about value at $750, and again, he says he would take less if he could. What a gem for them to have. They are so lucky to get Jason Spezza playing the way he is at this stage of his career for such a cheap price tag, and they need to find some more guys like that. But Simmonds and Thornton were the guys you thought would bring the killer instinct, and they did not. I mean, guys like Jake Muzzin on the back end were hurt at the end of it, but still, those are the types of players that can lead by example with that physical style that they're missing. Like, if you look at all the top teams, like the Leafs blue line was a lot better, but maybe they're not big enough and aggressive enough, and they need some more of that in the forward group too. So they still need some more physicality and size, and I'm not sure exactly what players they go after, but they need to find an element of that can actually produce it. I mean, it looked good on paper coming into the year. It just didn't work out. So they need to shake things up and see what they can find in free agency or through trades this offseason. So let me know your expectations of the Leafs. What can they do this offseason? I know we're going to see some likely, from some fairly significant things. I don't think we're going to see any blockbuster big deals like a Marner trade. But, even Chris Johnston, insider for Sportsnet, said himself he expects there to be at least one major impact player added to this roster for the coming season. Everybody's going to be excited about. So if that's going to happen, somebody's going to leave town. So you're bound to see some guys like Riley, Anderson, possibly Hyman not return in an effort to make that happen. So let me know what your thoughts are. We'll discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.